Last year was an unprecedentedly tumultuous time for the film industry. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has left virtually no industry untouched, has meant that all types of businesses around the world have had to adapt their practices to stand any chance of surviving beyond the crisis. Film studios and distributors have been no different, experimenting with different release methods to ensure that their movies can still make them money. Most of the major releases planned for 2020 have simply been postponed, in some cases multiple times, in the hopes that once the crisis is averted, the industry can return to a relative normalcy. Now, almost a year after the pandemic began, what has been made abundantly clear is relative normalcy is still some way away. With studios and distributors in possession of a mounting backlog of new movies, and with production on even more new movies still underway, they are looking at new ways of making money. The obvious pioneer in this arena is Warner Bros. In November last year, they announced that Wonder Woman 1984 would be made available to stream on HBO Max at the same time that it would be released in US cinemas. This announcement was followed a few weeks later with the reveal that in fact all the films Warner Bros. Had planned for 2021 releases would also be made available on HBO Max simultaneously with their cinema release. This strategy has been met with an incredible amount of division from filmmakers and film audiences alike. Certainly it was a surprising announcement, but not entirely unforeseeable or even unprecedented. Since the pandemic began, there has arguably only been one major cinema release, Warner Bros. Tenet. Under normal circumstances, this film was projected to be one of the highest grossing of the year, and had the potential to gross over $1 billion. At the time of writing, the film has only made just over $360 million worldwide. It should be said that under the circumstances, this was actually a remarkable feat. American cinemas were broadly closed at the time of the film's release, and big American blockbusters like Tenet rely on the domestic box office returns. For Christopher Nolan's last film, Dunkirk, the domestic US box office accounted for almost 40% of the film's worldwide gross, whereas it only accounted for about 15% of Tenet's. And with cinemas around the world employing strict social distancing measures, and many cinemagoers simply not wanting to risk catching the virus by seeing the film, the overall response was markedly diminished. Therefore, for the film to have still grossed as highly as it did is impressive, but with marketing costs taken into account, coupled with the film's production budget, it is likely that it will not have broken even. If a film which was poised to perform so successfully could fail with a traditional cinema release, it is hardly surprising that subsequent planned releases like Death on the Nile and Wonder Woman 1984 were then pushed back further by their respective studios. And in the case of the latter, it was later announced that it would be released in cinemas and on streaming simultaneously. Although this specific release strategy was unprecedented, the notion of releasing these big blockbusters directly on streaming services in 2020 was not. The biggest example is Disney's Mulan, which was planned for a traditional cinema release, but was instead debuted on the studio's own streaming service, Disney+. However, this release was hidden behind an additional Premier Access paywall, which proved unpopular amongst online commentators, but evidently the company saw some success with this strategy, as they're planning on doing it again with the release of Raya and the Last Dragon this year. Interestingly, however, Pixar's Soul was released on the platform at no additional cost, among other films like Artemis Fowl, which were admittedly not projected to perform as well at the box office. Where Disney seems to differ from Warner Bros. Is the fact that they are considering these films on a case-by-case basis. Films like Black Widow and Death on the Nile have simply been postponed, and there have been no suggestions so far that they will be released on Disney Plus at the same time as or instead of their theatrical release. It should be noted that both these examples fall under the Disney umbrella, but are ultimately the responsibility of Marvel Studios and 20th Century Studios respectively. Warner Bros. Has no such similar subdivisions, and so is responsible for all of its releases, hence their initiative in releasing their entire slate on HBO Max. That said, it is noteworthy that the other major studios haven't really followed suit. Major films like No Time to Die and F9 The Fast Saga are still scheduled for traditional cinema releases in the near future, although they too might be postponed, and there have also been rumours that the producers of the former have been looking for streaming outlets. Apple TV Plus were reportedly the frontrunner in an alleged bidding war for the rights to No Time to Die, although these rumours have since been denied by the producers. So, with Disney looking at its films on a case-by-case basis, currently no plans for streaming releases for films produced by its subsidiaries like Marvel Studios and 20th Century Studios, and the other major studios like Universal not looking at any streaming options, Warner Bros. Is seemingly on its own in this fight. It's been little over a month since news of their 2021 plans broke, and many expected the other studios to follow that trend, but they haven't. Why? Well, Disney and Warner Bros. Are in a unique position in that they, or at least their parent companies, own recently launched streaming services. It makes sense for them from a business perspective. While very few cinemas are open worldwide and no new films are being released in theatres, people are staying home and watching films. Therefore, subscriptions to Disney Plus and HBO Max have actually been boosted because of the pandemic. For such new streaming services, the current crisis has actually been somewhat beneficial in that regard. Disney reported that their revenue this year was down in every area except direct-to-consumer and international, in large part because of their new in-house streaming service, which now boasts over 86 million paid subscribers. The most recent numbers suggest that HBO Max has over 12 million paid subscribers, though it should be noted that these numbers were released before Wonder Woman 1984 came onto the platform, which may have bolstered its numbers. Additionally, HBO Max is currently unavailable worldwide, so these numbers only account for North America. Regardless, it's not an insignificant number when you factor in how new the service is, how few territories it's currently available in, and how relatively few pieces of original content it has. It's unsurprising, therefore, that they want to bolster their numbers further to compete with the other new streamers like Disney Plus, as well as the industry giants like Netflix and Amazon Prime. Releasing the slate of Warner Brothers films for 2021 on there might just convince millions of viewers to buy in, especially given the pandemic and the fact that many of these new releases may not be widely available given the mass shutdown of cinemas worldwide. It makes good business sense for AT&T, the parent company of both Warner Brothers and HBO Max, and may also prove immensely beneficial to audiences who can watch these films in the comfort of their own homes. However, this decision has sparked controversy amongst the filmmakers, who were not informed prior to the announcement. Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune, one of the films affected, has been particularly vocal in his disapproval of the decision. In his article, he claimed that Dune's image and sound were meticulously designed to be seen in movie theatres, and went so far as to hint of a boycott of Warner Brothers going forward, suggesting that this reversal from being a legacy home for filmmakers to the new era of complete disregard draws a clear line for him. Filmmaking is a collaboration, reliant on the mutual trust of teamwork, and Warner Brothers has declared that they are no longer on the same team. Other filmmakers like Christopher Nolan have also been vocal in their upset over the decision. The controversy goes beyond simply not realising the vision of the filmmakers. The monetary compensation that was offered to Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot, the director and star of Wonder Woman 1984, for their film's release on the streaming service, was not offered to any of the filmmakers involved in the other films, although admittedly this error was later rectified by Warner Brothers. But this lack of respect to the other directors and favouritism towards the trial film may just have cost Warner Brothers its reputation as a legacy home for filmmakers, as Villeneuve described it. So, with all this in mind, what exactly is the future of cinema? Villeneuve argues that cinema on the big screen is more than a business. It is an art form that brings people together, celebrating humanity, enriching our empathy for one another. It's one of the very last artistic, in-person collective experiences we share as human beings. Once the pandemic is over, theatres will be filled again with film lovers. It's certainly an emotive argument, one which many other filmmakers share, but how valid is it? As a similar proprietor of the cinema experience, I think that movie theatres will continue to exist in some shape or form, but after everything that's happened during this crisis, I think it is naive to believe that things will go back to exactly as they were before. As much as I adore the cinema experience, it's hard to ignore the reality that most audiences will see maybe 1 or 2 films in a physical cinema each year. Streaming, and home video before it, have transformed the notion of cinema going, and over the last few years we've seen a move towards event cinema. That is, big screen spectacle films, the experience of which can't fully be replicated at home. These blockbusters attract a huge global audience at the cinema, and smaller scale films like dramas and horrors that don't rely so heavily on spectacle have found a larger audience on streaming platforms. This pandemic may have just pushed the industry over the edge, and streaming may supplant traditional cinemas as the primary exhibitor of films. I think certainly in the immediate future, the principle of the HBO Max plan is actually sound. Releasing films in cinemas and on streaming simultaneously affords audiences options, and may actually lead to some films gaining a larger audience than they otherwise would have. We've already seen that happen with some Netflix films, especially this last year. Movies like I'm Thinking of Ending Things may not have reached as wide of an audience if they were released traditionally. It is unfortunate, therefore, that there has been so much fallout from Warner Brothers' decision, because the foundational logic is good both for them and audiences, but their approach backfired massively. This will be an incredibly interesting year for movies and may yet determine the future of the cinema-going experience. Although other studios haven't fully followed suit, It would not surprise me if later in the year we get similar announcements for other tentpole films like No Time to Die, even if their simultaneous release involves a heightened rental or premiere access fee, much like Mulan or Raya and the Last Dragon. There is a lot at stake for the major Hollywood studios and distributors. For some, their very survival may be in the balance. Even Warner Brothers, a mainstay since the golden age of filmmaking, could be at risk. Its parent company AT&T reached a record $190 billion of debt last year. I do hope and genuinely believe that cinemas will survive this crisis in some form. The reality is, however, studios, distributors and exhibitors will all need to adapt in order to continue operating. Studios have already proven that they can continue to produce new content amidst new restrictions and almost daily changes to the pandemic situation and government guidance. The onus is now on the distributors and exhibitors to prove that they can still make movies a financially viable business. The HBO Max gamble by Warner Brothers is one such solution. The Disney Plus Premier Access strategy is another. It will be interesting to see how successful they and the other studios will be at getting new movies off the ground, especially since Tenet has already proven that the traditional way of doing things won't work under the current circumstances. What do you think about the news surrounding Warner Brothers and their 2021 slate of films being made available on HBO Max? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed my analysis, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more. But until next time, thanks.